The snow came in hard the next morning, no warning, no softness. Just a wall of white devouring the sky. By noon, the wind screamed against the cabin walls, tearing at the shutters like a thing possessed. Inside, the children huddled near the fire, silent and watchful. Clara fed the flames with anything that would burn: scrap wood, a broken chair, even pages from an old ledger found in the pantry. The chimney groaned, and then, without warning, part of it caved inward. Smoke flooded the room, and the older girls coughed violently. Clara rushed to smother the worst of it with a wool blanket. Elias threw open the front door to clear the smoke, and snow spilled in like a crashing wave. They worked together through the blizzard's howl, patching the hole with planks and blankets, hammering them into place with trembling fingers. Clara's hands went numb before she realized it. Elias didn't say a word, just handed her nails and a hammer, jaw clenched in grim focus. When it was over and the wind finally lessened, Clara collapsed against the wall, breathing raggedly. That night, the cold seeped into every crack and seam. Clara wrapped the baby in her cloak and held her close, humming a lullaby she hadn't sung since before Emma died. The girl stirred, half asleep, one tiny hand wrapping into Clara's dress. She didn't sleep much. Her thoughts wouldn't allow it. Every hour, she checked the walls for new leaks, listened for the wind's voice shifting. She felt the weight of 7 lives pressing down on her shoulders, as heavy as the snow on the roof. At dawn, Clara stepped outside to find fresh tracks near the barn, too large for a coyote, too steady for a lost dog. Elias joined her, a shotgun slung across his back. "Wolf?" she asked. He knelt, studying the print. "No. Boots." They followed the trail past the barn and into the trees. The snow was deep, and Clara had to brace herself with every step. After 10 minutes, the trail disappeared into the pines. Then, on a fallen log, they saw it, half a deer carcass, frozen solid, its hindquarters dragged cleanly to their fence line. Whoever left it hadn't wanted thanks, just made sure they wouldn't starve. "Someone's watching us," Elias murmured. "Helping us," she corrected softly. They returned to the house in silence. That night, Clara cleaned the deer meat and cooked stew for the first time since she'd arrived. The smell brought the children to the kitchen like a tide. She said nothing, just ladled it into bowls and watched as they devoured it without ceremony. On the third night, he came. Clara was peeling potatoes when the door creaked. Elias opened it, shotgun in hand, but lowered it quickly. A tall man stood in the doorway, dark hair streaked with snow, clothes stitched from leather and fur. He said nothing. His eyes scanned the room, pausing on Clara, then the children. She met his gaze and nodded once. "Come in. You're freezing." He entered without a word, moved to the hearth, and crouched beside it. The baby, curious, reached out. He gently took her tiny hand in his and returned it with an almost imperceptible smile. "Tama," Elias said quietly. "He's Mandan. Lives alone out west of the ridge. Saved Pa's life once." Clara poured him a bowl of stew. He accepted it with a nod, sat on the floor, and ate silently. When finished, he stood and left without a sound, disappearing into the night like mist. After that, he returned every few days. Never spoke. Just appeared, always at dusk, bringing something: a bag of dried herbs, a bundle of firewood, a small bundle of rabbit pelts. The children grew used to him. One day, the youngest boy toddled over and offered Tama his favorite toy, a wooden horse with only 3 legs. Tama took it with solemn reverence, then placed it on the mantel. Clara began to sense a rhythm in their days. The snow never stopped, but the fear started to loosen its grip. With Tama's quiet help, they reinforced the roof, dug out the barn, and built a new pen for the chickens. One night, when the baby wouldn't stop crying from fever, Tama slipped Clara a pouch of crushed root. "Boil with water," he murmured. Only once. It was the first time she'd heard his voice, low, rough, and sure. The fever broke by morning. Still, something inside Clara trembled. Not from the storm or the hunger, but from herself. One afternoon, she found herself staring at the letter again, Thomas's final words. It felt like a lie now. A ghost's promise. She folded it slowly and tucked it into her dress pocket, but her chest ached as if it had vanished from inside her. That night, as the children slept, she sat beside the fire and opened the Bible, its leather cover cracked. She tried to read aloud, but the words blurred. Her voice wavered. She choked back a sob and closed the book. Elias watched her from the shadows. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I'm supposed to be their mother," she whispered. "But I don't know how. I feel like I'm pretending." Elias shrugged. "You feed us. Keep us warm. That's more than most would do. Most would have left." She looked at him, at the boy forced into a man's burden. "And you? You stayed." He looked at the fire. Didn't know where else to go. The next morning, she woke to find Thomas sitting on the porch. He was sharpening a blade, eyes scanning the horizon. Elias joined her. "He knows," the boy said. "Watts is coming back." "Can we stop him?" Clara asked. "Not alone." Tom arose, gestured toward the trees. "Watch. Wait. Quiet." They followed him to the edge of the clearing. Hidden by pines, they saw Hiram Watts on horseback, 2 men riding beside him. One carried a rifle. They were scouting, marking paths in the snow. "Tomorrow," Tama whispered. "They return." Clara felt her stomach twist. She'd only just begun to believe they could make it. And now it was all about to be ripped away. Back at the house, Clara didn't speak. She chopped wood until her arms burned, swept every inch of the cabin, and stitched together the torn blanket the children shared at night. She gathered spare fabric and began sewing something new, patches, colors, whatever scraps she could find. Something to hold them together. That night, she called the children to the hearth. "We may have to fight for this place," she said. "But we're not alone anymore. You're not alone anymore. And I'm not leaving." They didn't answer. But none of them looked away. Later, she found the baby asleep beneath the patchwork blanket, holding tight to the 3-legged wooden horse. Clara leaned in and kissed the girl's forehead. For the first time, she didn't feel like an intruder. She felt like a mother. And somewhere beyond the window, in the frozen woods, Tama watched the lights flicker and disappear, knowing what was coming with the morning. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows of the stagecoach as it groaned up the ridge. Frost clung to the glass in delicate webs, but inside, Clara Whitmore's grip on the letter was tighter than the winter's grasp outside. Her fingers were chapped, pale, knuckles bloodless from squeezing too hard. The ink had begun to fade, but she'd memorized every word. "My children are without a mother. I am without a wife. Come to Dakota. We'll build a life together. Thomas Archer." Clara exhaled, slow and long, her breath fogging the window. All she could see was white, the road, the sky, the field. White that stretched endlessly like the afterlife. The coach creaked to a halt at the edge of a modest clearing. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a frostbitten beard, jumped down and opened the door. "This is your stop, ma'am. Archer Homestead. Good luck." He didn't help her down. Just nodded and turned back to the horses. She stepped into the snow, her boots immediately sinking. The cold sliced through her wool skirt like a blade. A small, weather-worn house stood hunched against the wind, shutters swinging. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. A barn leaned like an old man beside it, its doors cracked open, revealing a rusted plow and nothing else. No welcoming figure. No Thomas. Clara hesitated. Had she misunderstood the date? Was he working the fields? She approached the front steps, her suitcase bumping against her leg with each stride. A face flickered in the window. Then another. Then more. 7 of them. Children. All of them watching her with wide, solemn eyes. The door creaked open, and a boy stepped out. 15, maybe 16. Straw-blonde hair under a too small hat, eyes too hard for someone so young. "You the bride?" he asked. "I'm Clara Whitmore," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. "Mr. Archer's wife." The boy stared. his expression unreadable, but something in his face collapsed before her. "You're late," he said. "Pa's dead. Buried out back." The words slapped her with the blunt force of a hammer. She staggered back a step. "No. No, that can't be. I got his letter. Pa got sick 3 weeks ago. Died 4 days later." He paused. "We didn't know you were still coming." Another child appeared behind him, barefoot, pale, maybe 10 years old. Then a girl of 12, clinging to a toddler with a filthy face and thumb in her mouth. All of them underfed, dirty, silent. Clara's voice caught in her throat. She'd come all this way. Sold her late husband's watch for passage. Endured hunger, cold, and fear for what? For a dead man and 7 orphan children? "Then, who's taking care of you?" she asked. The boy squared his shoulders. "I am. Name's Elias." The next hour passed in a blur. Elias led her inside. No fire, no bread, just a drafty shell of a house and silence thick as wool. The walls were cracked, furniture sparse. A cradle in the corner held a crying infant with red cheeks and no diaper. "No one else?" Clara asked. "Ma died giving birth to her," Elias said, nodding at the baby. "We ain't got no one else." Her legs gave out. She sat on a wooden bench, the letter still in her hand. A cruel joke. A life she'd been promised, ripped away before it even began. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The children watched her like she was some beast from the forest. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in the barn, wrapped in her travel cloak on a pile of old hay. Wind seeped through the slats, biting her skin. The letter lay beside her, now limp and damp. She thought of the grave she'd passed behind the house, a wooden cross, nothing carved. She thought of the husband who'd written to her in desperate, gentle words, and died before he could keep his promise. She thought of her own baby, Emma, dead 2 winters ago from fever. Of Samuel, her first husband, who'd never come home from the war. She had nothing left. And now, not even the future she'd clung to. The baby's wail cut through the wind. She sat up, staring toward the house. The next morning, Clara boiled snow in a dented tin pot and poured it into a cracked kettle. There was half a sack of oats left. Mold had started to climb up the fabric, but inside the oats were dry. She made thin porridge. 1 bowl per child. No sugar. No milk. Elias took his silently. The younger ones hesitated. The baby wouldn't eat unless she held her. After breakfast, Clara opened every cupboard and made a list in her head. They had dried beans, a few onions, 2 jars of what looked like pickled carrot. No meat, no flour, no lard, no father, no mother, no plan. She washed the baby's soiled clothes in snowmelt and hung them near the hearth. She found a hairbrush and combed the youngest girl's matted curls. The child leaned against her leg and didn't flinch. Later that day, a rider approached from the north. A tall man on a wide chestnut horse. He didn't dismount. Just reined in at the fence. Elias and Clara stood outside to meet him. "I'm Hiram Watts," the man said. "Thomas owed me money. Promised this land as payment." Clara stepped forward, nerves raw but spine straight. "Thomas Archer was my husband. This land belongs to our family now." "You got papers?" Hiram asked. She hesitated. "No. Not yet. But then it don't belong to you." He tipped his hat mockingly. "I'll be back tomorrow. With a deed and a rifle, if it comes to that." He turned and rode off, snow kicking up behind him. Clara's stomach churned. She turned to Elias, expecting fear, but saw only a tightening of the jaw. "He's been sniffing around since Pa got sick," he muttered. "He wants the wheat field. That's all. Can he take it?" Elias shrugged. "He'll try." That evening, Clara chopped firewood until her hands bled. Elias joined her, then the 10-year-old, then the rest. Even the little girl gathered sticks. They said nothing, just worked. Together. Inside, Clara lit a fire and gathered the children around. The room glowed with a weak, flickering light, shadows dancing across the walls. She looked at each of their faces, frightened, hungry, uncertain. They were more ghosts than children. But alive. She cleared her throat. I came here thinking I was saving someone, she said. But maybe it's you who'll save me. No one answered. But the littlest girl crawled into her lap, laid her head on Clara's chest, and sighed. Outside, the wind moaned. Clara closed her eyes and pulled the child close, knowing the storm was only just beginning. Morning broke, pale and unforgiving. The sun barely crept over the hills, casting a sickly light over the snow-covered homestead. The trees stood motionless, as though bracing for what was coming. Clara stood at the window, rifle in her hands, pulse steady but deep beneath her skin. Fear throbbed like a second heartbeat. Elias paced near the door, jaw clenched, boots scuffing the worn floor. The children were silent, gathered in the loft overhead, instructed to stay quiet unless Clara called them. They understood. Last night's calm had vanished, replaced by a tension so thick it felt like breathing through cloth. Tama emerged from the woods just before noon, his form cutting through the snow like a shadow. He didn't speak, only nodded once at Clara, then moved to stand behind the barn. Elias followed without needing a word. They had a plan, rudimentary, dangerous, but better than surrendering. Clara took position on the porch, coat buttoned to the throat, her hair tied back beneath a wool scarf. She felt like a statue, all stillness and resolve. The rifle rested against her shoulder. Her fingers twitched. The silence cracked under the distant crunch of hooves. Hiram Watts rode in like a man sure of himself. 2 others flanked him, rifles across their saddles. They stopped 10 yards from the porch, steam rising from the horse's nostrils. Watts looked down at her, lips curled in an amused sneer. Didn't think you'd be the type to dig in. This land belongs to my family, Clara said. You'll leave now, or I'll make you. He chuckled, leaned forward on the saddle horn. Lady, I admire your nerve. But Thomas owed me. His signature's on the deed. You've got nothing. Her knuckles whitened around the rifle. I have 7 reasons to stay. And a rifle loaded for each one of you. Watts's smirk faded. He dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the snow. You threatening me, widow? I'm protecting what's mine. Behind the barn, Tama waited in the shadows, bow drawn. Elias crouched near the fence with a second rifle, breath misting, eyes locked on the intruders. The second man on horseback moved slightly, lifting his rifle, but a sharp whistle cut through the air. An arrow buried itself into the snow at his horse's feet. The horse spooked, rearing back. The man cursed, barely keeping his seat. Watts turned toward the trees. You got friends out there, huh? Enough to put you in the ground, Clara said. For a moment no one moved. The wind picked up, whistling through the trees. Watts looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. He saw it then. Not a desperate widow, but a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything worth protecting. He weighed the rifle, the cold, the shadows in the woods, and he stepped back. This ain't over, he muttered. You'll wish it was. He climbed into the saddle and turned his horse. The others followed, reluctantly, glancing over their shoulders as they disappeared into the trees. Clara didn't lower the rifle until the forest swallowed them whole. The silence returned, heavier than before. Then, from behind the barn, Thomas stepped out. Elias followed, eyes wide, breath coming fast. You think they'll come back? The boy asked. Clara nodded. But not today. That evening, they built the biggest fire yet. Not just for warmth, but for something sacred. Clara roasted the last of the venison and shared it evenly. The children huddled around her, not just for food, but for closeness. For safety. Thomas sat slightly apart, sharpening his knife, but his eyes, dark and still, never strayed far from the children. When the baby reached out for him again, he let her wrap a fist around his finger. Clara watched, heart thick in her chest. Later, when the children were asleep, she stepped out onto the porch where Thomas stood gazing up at the moon. She joined him, wrapping her cloak tight. Thank you, she said quietly. You saved us. He didn't speak for a while. Then, you saved yourself. She looked at him, at the scars on his hands, the weariness behind his eyes. Why did you help? His jaw worked silently for a moment. Then, my wife died. My son too. I watched the sickness take them. I couldn't save them. But I saw your fire. I saw the children. I remembered what it felt like. Her eyes burned. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. You don't have to be alone anymore. He looked at her, and for the first time, truly met her gaze. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they couldn't say aloud. The weeks passed. Snow gave way to slush, and then to the first signs of thaw. Chickens clucked again. Seeds were sown. Water from the stream ran clear and cold. And Clara began to laugh, rarely at first and then often, especially when the baby learned to crawl. She and Elias repaired the broken fence. The older girls helped Clara stitch new dresses from old curtains. And the boy who'd never smiled, Nathaniel, carved a wooden cradle for the baby without being asked. Thomas stayed close, always working, never asking for thanks. He taught Elias how to trap, how to read weather by the smell of the wind. He never entered the house unless invited, but slowly, the children began to call him by name. Clara still read the letter sometimes, though less for comfort and more for remembrance. She had buried Thomas beside his wife, placed a stone between their graves. What they'd written to each other still mattered, but it no longer defined her. Spring came, and with it, a peace neither promised nor expected. One morning, Clara stood in the doorway, watching the children run barefoot in the fresh grass. Elias was helping Tama fix a broken wheel. The baby laughed from her blanket. The wind no longer screamed, it whispered. Clara turned her face to the sun. The ache in her chest remained, grief never left completely. But it no longer controlled her. She wasn't waiting for someone to rescue her. She wasn't lost. She had a home, and she had made it herself. To all who watch this story unfold, if something in it moved you, let that be a call. A call to protect what matters. To love fiercely even when it hurts, and to believe, as Clara did, that no matter how broken the world seems, something beautiful can still grow. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe. We tell stories like these to remember the strength we carry, and the hope we share. The summer sun rose over the plains, warming the wooden beams of the homestead, and stirring the scent of soil and smoke. Clara stood in the garden, her skirts dusted with earth, a trowel in one hand and a basket of potatoes in the other. Each plant, each row, was a symbol, not just of survival, but of permanence. The ground that once threatened to swallow them whole now offered its own quiet promise. She glanced up toward the field where Elias was guiding the younger boys, teaching them how to plant straight rows. The baby, now toddling on unsure legs, chased a chicken near the barn, her laughter sharp and clear as bells. The girls hung clothes to dry on a line strung between the porch, and a post Tama had helped her dig deep into the earth. It was the kind of day that felt whole, complete. Tama appeared over the hill's ridge just before midday, a bag of herbs slung over one shoulder and a fresh rabbit in his other hand. He didn't wave, but Clara knew he had seen them from far off. He never missed a thing. The children ran to him, each eager to be the first to greet him, and he allowed their chaos with quiet patience. One by one, they told him what they'd done that day, who had fought with whom, and who had helped whom. He listened to every word. Later, while the stew simmered over the fire, Clara found herself watching Tama's hands. Steady, practiced, with fingers calloused by years of work and loss. They were not the hands of a guest. They were the hands of someone who had stayed. She sat beside him on the porch, holding 2 tin cups filled with cooled tea. She handed one to him. He took it without question. "You never asked what happened to my husband," she said softly. "I knew he was gone," he answered. "He promised me a home. Said he'd built a place for me and the children. He died before I arrived." Tama nodded once, letting the silence carry the weight of what didn't need saying. "I didn't know who I'd become when I got here," she continued. But I don't think I was ever supposed to be the woman he imagined. I became someone else instead. You became who they needed, Tama said. Clara looked out at the fields, now rippling with green shoot. And who I needed. Thunder rumbled in the distance, not from the sky, but from the south, where clouds of dust trailed across the horizon. Riders. A group. Fast-moving. Not travelers, not neighbors. Tama rose without a word and went inside. Moments later, he returned with the rifle Elias had cleaned just that morning. Clara followed him, shouting to the children. Inside. Now. They obeyed instantly. They had learned to recognize the shift in her voice, the tremble buried under command. Elias handed her his smaller rifle. From the barn roof, he said. You'll see them coming. She ran, heart thudding with every step. From the peak she could see 5 men, armed, unfamiliar. Not What's, but not strangers to violence either. They rode hard, their formation loose but practiced. Thomas stood beside the house, motionless. He didn't raise his weapon yet. He waited, reading their posture. When the men arrived, they stopped just short of the gate. The one in front, a man with a long gray coat and a revolver on each hip, raised a hand. Looking for someone named Clara Wainscott, he called out. You her? Clara, from the rooftop, kept her rifle steady. Who's asking? Name's Merrick. I served with your husband during the war. He owed me a debt. Another one. Another ghost with teeth. I was told this land was available, Merrick continued. That you were widowed. That you might be looking to sell. I'm not. Well, see, that's unfortunate. My men and I made a long journey. And we don't leave empty-handed. Thomas stepped forward. His voice was quiet but cold. You'll leave. Now. Merrick smirked. And who's this? The help. Tama didn't answer. He simply aimed. The standoff stretched. The wind picked up. A hawk circled overhead. Elias, hidden inside with the children, waited with the same clenched stillness that Clara felt in her chest. I'm giving you one chance, Clara called down. One. You turn your horses and you ride. Or you'll never leave this land. Merrick laughed. Lady, I've buried better threats than you. The shot came from Elias, sharp, clean, and deliberate. Not a kill shot, but close. It splintered the wooden post near Merrick's foot. The horses whinnied. One man cursed. Then Tama moved, fast and low. In 2 heartbeats, he had disarmed the nearest rider, pulled him from his saddle, and held a blade to his throat. Everything stopped. Merrick held up his hands, fury flickering behind his eyes. We're leaving. No, Clara said. You're leaving your weapons. They hesitated. Tama pressed the blade tighter. One by one, they dropped their guns into the snow. Go, she said. And don't come back. They obeyed, riding off with silent rage. Clara waited until they disappeared beyond the trees before she climbed down from the barn. Her knees were shaking. She looked at Tama. Thank you. He didn't nod this time. He just stood there, breathing slow, as though waiting for something to fall that hadn't yet. That night, the children slept soundly. Elias had the baby curled beside him, one hand protectively resting on her side. The girls shared the patchwork blanket Clara had sewn in those dark early days. She found Tama outside, again on the porch. He sat with his knife across his knees, gaze turned upward. They'll come back, she said. Yes. I'll be ready. He looked at her then. You already were. She sat beside him. I want you to stay. I have. I mean, not just near. Here. With us. Thomas studied her for a long moment. Then he set the knife aside and reached into his coat, pulling out something wrapped in leather. He handed it to her. Inside was a necklace of braided twine and small carved wood, a family charm. A Mandan tradition. It meant unity, shelter, chosen bonds. I made it for her, he said. Long ago. But I never gave it to her. I didn't know how. Clara's throat tightened. She traced the carvings, each one shaped like a root, a tree, a flame. You know now, she whispered. He nodded. They didn't speak again. Words had carried them this far, but now silence said more than language ever could. By fall, the children no longer called Clara ma'am. They called her Mama. The patchwork blanket was too small for the growing family, so they made another. This time together, each square stitched with initials, patterns, pieces of memory. The house expanded. With help, they added 2 new rooms. A garden bloomed in spring, not just with crops but with wildflowers planted by small, eager hands. The ghost still came sometimes, in dreams, in wind, in silence. But Clara faced them with grace. Not as someone broken, but as someone forged by fire and rebuilt with love. This was not the life she had been promised. It was better. It was hers. And for anyone listening, wondering if they are strong enough to face the unknown, to protect something they love even when it costs them everything, let Clara's story be the answer. You are. If this story moved you, let it live beyond these words. Like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to remember that love, chosen, earned, and fought for, is the kind that never leaves.